WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. This is Soul Lounge Prime Time. This is the Night Watchman, Bob Ponce. DJ Leroy ain't here today, but he's going to miss a great show. I'm pleased to have as my guest today from the New York Yankees, Mr. Ray Negron. He's had a long career with the Yankees spanning 46 years, man, and you're only like 33.
I'm 30. I'll be 34 tomorrow.
All right, okay. He went back in time in one of those DeLoreans.
It's about time. It's about space, about two men in a stranger's place.
Now you're really dating yourself. No, they don't know nothing about that.
No, nobody does.
Yeah. So, Ray, how are you doing these days?
I'm doing. Hey, Bob. It's nice that you called me to do your show.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked to do several shows today.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I'm doing your show is because we're brothers. We go back too long, almost 50 damn years.
Right.
And so, in essence, I couldn't say no to you, especially you were insistent.
Well, you could. I actually lost all the blackmail evidence in a
thanks,
storage
Bob.
accident.
That's all good.
So you're safe.
Bob, to say that I'm somewhat depressed is an understatement. I was like under my blankets this morning. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to forget about it. I took this one hard. This was tougher than any of the last 10 years.
Why was this one so tough for you?
Because I fell in love with the team. I fell in love with Gio Urshela. I fell in love with Gleyber Torres. I've always loved CC Sabathia. I had a great year with my president, Randy Levine, who, you know what, he makes me feel like I'm needed sometimes, and that's important to me.
So, Ray, you've gone through so many different cycles of great Yankee teams, and you even connect to some of the teams that even really predated you. I know through your long association through the Yankees, you got a chance to get close with Babe Ruth's granddaughter,
Right.
and
the daughter.
And the daughter, okay.
Right. Who just passed away this year at 102.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So this team was one that you felt had that kind of spark of some of the old Yankee teams?
I'm not going to say that, okay? It's just that these were nice young kids who are starting to understand the true Yankee way, and in turn are understanding it's not just about what you do on the field; it's also what you do off the field. They're understanding the responsibility of what the NY and the pinstripes really mean. Some of them are understanding what did it mean to have Thurman Munson on your club. What was Billy Martin all about? Some of them actually asked me questions. And I am grateful and appreciative of that. And because I did the book Yankee Miracles, I get to talk about the Yankees of the past. So in turn, these kids today are like, they're getting it, they're understanding. And you know what? I was proud of what they did. Going into the playoffs and beating Minnesota the way they did convincingly, and you know what, they gave it a shot on Saturday night. As I told somebody, I can't blame Green for giving up the 3-run homer. That's going to happen. It's a part of the game. You can't blame Chapman for giving up the home run to Altuve. It's a part of the game. He overthought. He threw him a change when, in essence, hey, you're throwing 100 miles an hour. I was getting texts from Roberto Alomar, the Hall of Famer, saying, why is he throwing a change when he has a 100-mile-an-hour pitch? You know what I'm saying? And it's just, hey, he was trying to give it his best.
It's a chess game, and sometimes you get checkmated. Yeah. Yep. So let's talk about CC Sabathia. End of an illustrious career.
Why? Because we're in Harlem?
Because it's the end of an illustrious career.
Okay.
Yeah, but you've known CC since he was a teenager. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts about CC and even about the conversation that you've had with CC recently.
I love CC, one of the good people, good heart. I was lucky. I'll never forget the day that the team president and general manager John Hart called me into his office, in Winter Haven, Florida, spring training, and he said, "Ray, take a look out there." And his office, the window opened up, and you saw the field. You know what I'm saying? And CeCe was pitching, and he said, "I want you to watch over that kid. He's going to be one of the greats, maybe a Hall of Famer if he stays clean." You know what I'm saying? And CeCe Sabathia is a Hall of Famer as far as I'm concerned, because he always had a good heart, good person, sweetheart. You know, and you know what he did, whatever he had to do to win. And like at times, while a Yankee, he became a leader. And he used to be like, sometimes when he's on the mound, he used to act like he's a tough guy. You know what I'm saying? And I remember Mike Francesa saying one day, "Come on, CeCe, you're not a tough guy. You're not a gangster. Well, stop it." You know what I'm saying? But CeCe would do whatever he had to do. You understand? If we got into a street fight, he's going to grab a baseball bat and do what he's got to do. And he's just a beautiful guy. And family is great. Amber, his wife, is incredible. You know, she's the leader of that pack, okay? And so he got lucky when he found her, you know, and she's gorgeous. But anyway.
All right. I'll take that to heart. So let's go back to the beginning for you. Because, some people may not know your story, or certainly a lot of people do at this point in time. But the start of your Yankee career was you basically writing graffiti on the side of Yankee Stadium.
1973, I'm out there with 3 other individuals, 3 other Rhodes Scholars, and we decided that we were going to do that. Someone dared me, and I took him up on the dare, and I started putting like an NY on the wall. Next thing you know, one guy says, "Look out!" Everybody starts to run. A car's pulled right on the sidewalk. 2 guys jump out. We all run. I tumble over one guy. The one guy gets up. He gets going. I'm caught, and next thing you know, I'm in a holding cell. And for whatever the reason, the one individual says, "Give me the kid." And next thing you know, they're dragging me into the Yankee locker room. They're giving me a uniform. And that night, I was the bat boy for the New York Yankees. And that man that caught me was George Steinbrenner, who had just brought the team. And somebody says to me, "You let that old guy catch you." That old guy was only 42 then. So 42 constitute being a kid. Okay? And he was a track star in college. So, yeah, he caught me. And I ain't ashamed of it either.
So talk about fate, because obviously that was an incident that literally turned the whole direction of your life.
You know, faith is the hunter, man, because how things, you know, like somebody pointed out to me, had he not done that, you would not have been there to do this, to do that. This would not. And if you didn't do that, that wouldn't have happened, and this wouldn't have happened. And all the way going into the '90s with Dwight Gooden, you know what I'm saying, from the standpoint of finding Dwight, and then the boss listening to me to, in essence, bring him back, or Daryl, or I mean, just so many different situations.
Sure.
You know, so I mean, fate, man, is very weird how all of that happened. The youngest Yankee ever was a guy by the name of Jose Rijo. Okay, I'm the one that caught George. You remember that?
I do remember that.
Right?
Yes.
Because I'm the one that talked George Steinbrenner into bringing him to New York, because the Mets had the other teenager by the name of Dwight Gooden.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
So in essence, I'm very proud of that, and people never talk about the youngest Yankee ever, which was Jose Rijo.
Right. Well, you over years developed obviously a very special relationship with George Steinbrenner, one in which he trusted your judgment on a lot of situations, sometimes over and above some of the people whose jobs it was to make these decisions.
Well, you know, it's just a perfect example of that was George wanted to sign Gary Sheffield. And some of his people didn't want Gary Sheffield. And one of his honchos said, "Why should we sign Sheffield?" And he said, "Because Ray Negron thinks we should." And that didn't go roll over.
I'm sure the steam came out of the ears at that point.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the beginning, because you started it with the Yankee team that was nicknamed the Bronx Zoo. And There was a lot of characters, and there was a lot of turmoil. So you had George, you had Billy Martin,
Right.
you had Reggie Jackson,
Right.
you had a host of other people,
Thurman
Munson,
Sparky
Lyle. I mean,
Greg Nettles.
just
goes
some
on,
characters there. So there you are, the kid in all of this.
Right.
So you literally kind of became a man in the Yankee clubhouse.
Well, again, I am happy to be able to say, as I look at you, that you remember that era because you were already a friend of mine, and so you would be hearing all the crazy stories.
No, actually, I didn't know you then.
When did we get?
We didn't meet until the next decade. It was kind of about the mid '80s. You know.
Wow, that late.
Right. So I knew of that, but I didn't know you until afterwards. Okay. At that point in time, you were still very close to Reggie Jackson. Right. I think you were still hanging out at his place on Fifth Avenue, right. And you know, right. Let's just say you knew how to do the Reggie Jackson signature as well as he did.
Oops, yeah, I won't even get into any of that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, anyway,
I just said you knew. We're not saying or denying anything.
I'm not. Yeah. Beautiful day in Harlem.
Okay, but going back to being in the dugout the night that Reggie Jackson hit 3 home runs. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's one of my all-time great. Listen, yesterday I was sitting in the bathtub. That's where I do my best meditation.
Okay.
Real hot bath.
Uh-huh.
And I put on my music. Mm-hmm. And yesterday it was Sinatra. Mm-hmm. And it was the song, It Was a Very Good Year. Mm-hmm. You know? Because, remember, it starts at 17. Mm-hmm. At 17, that was my first year with the Yankees. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It goes on when I was 21. Mm-hmm. 21 is when we won our first world championship. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And,
right.
You know, it's just the aspect of the song. It hits home. Mm-hmm. You know, and so that year, it was the year of Reggie and Billy and Thurman and the fighting. Remember the heavy fighting?
Right.
And the straw that stirs the drink. Mm-hmm. Thurman Munson can only stir it bad. But then by the end of the season, Reggie understood that Thurman Munson actually stirred it very, very good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he saw the leader, the man that Thurman Munson was. And what people don't understand is by the end of the year, mm-hmm. they had become very good friends. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, we go into Game 6 of the 1977 World Series, which was the anniversary was this past Friday. Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, I knew that was a very special day. And we drove from 79th and 5th mm-hmm. through Harlem into Yankee Stadium, and a word wasn't spoken. We didn't say one word to each other. Mm-hmm. He was just already getting into that Reggie mm-hmm. thing, mm-hmm. okay?
He was was he perhaps the best big moment player you ever saw?
The best mm-hmm. ever. Him and Thurman Munson were. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that batting practice... Remember at that time, I used to get in uniform because mm-hmm. I would throw BP and stuff mm-hmm. like that, shag, mm-hmm. all that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in the outfield, and Reggie's just hitting ball after ball out of the ballpark, mm-hmm. hitting the back of the bleacher wall, which is very rare at mm-hmm. that time. Mm-hmm. And he was an incredible hitting session. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, he walked off the field. And he said he called Gene Michael, who was our eye in the sky. He would be scouting from the upstairs mm-hmm. and get everything and then give us information. And mm-hmm. he said, anything I should know tonight? And he said, fastball in. They think you can't handle it. Okay, got
wow.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so mm-hmm. Reggie cheated just a little bit. Mm-hmm. 1 foot out. Watch the footage. Mm-hmm. 1 foot back a little bit mm-hmm. so he could cheat on the fastball in. Mm-hmm. First pitch, line drive, home run. Mm-hmm. I say, Reggie, you want to take a curtain call? The fans are going crazy. And he said, hell no. After what I went through this season, no way. So, second time up, mm-hmm. line drive, home run. Reggie, they're going nuts. Why don't you take a curtain call? No, I said. So I went back at him and I said, when you hit the third, will you take a curtain call then? And let me be honest, I didn't say when. I said, if you hit a third, mm-hmm. will you take a curtain call then? Mm-hmm. And he goes, you're crazy, but I'll do it. Okay? Mm-hmm. Third time up, I got to pee in the worst way. I hope you can say pee on this show.
Yes, we can. Yes,
Okay, it's
yes.
a letter P.
Yes.
I had to pee in the worst way. I run to the bathroom, which was like right there by the dugout. And so I said to myself, now it's the time. I've been having to pee for like 4 innings. I run in, I put my zipper down. As I start to reach, all of a sudden I hear, the first pitch again, 3 consecutive pitches. Because in my mind, law of averages, there's no way he's going to do it on 3 pitches. So zipper down, I go to reach, I hear the roar, I grab the zipper, go back up, I pee on myself, but I run out, and as I run out, Reggie's already coming into the dugout. You see it in a famous picture of me, Thurman, Reggie, and Billy. That core, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's a beautiful picture that I have at home. And so when Reggie, I run to his ear, but Willie Randolph was talking to him. Willie, get out of the way. You actually see me saying it. You know what I'm saying? So I said, Reggie,
You
you
promised.
promised. And he looked at me. He looks out, runs out, and then takes his curtain call.
And
After
the
that,
crowd went wild.
the crowd went wild. After that, he would hit a foul ball and take a curtain call. Okay.
Wow, great time. So fast forward a few years later. So you had a brief career in the minors?
I got drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I went to play. I was in Bradenton, and when I proved to America that I couldn't hit, I was back to working with the Yankees again. So
Okay.
that lasted the best of a season. You know what I'm saying? Even though I was a second-round pick, they said, "Oh God, get him out of here." So that's what happened.
So you started working with ball players at that point in time?
No, then I came back to the Yankees, and I went back into the clubhouse, and I was working in the clubhouse and working with the guys, and working with the boss, and then Reggie left, and I had decided, what. Because everybody said, that I was, they used to say I was a pretty smart guy. You know what I'm saying? And I started to believe it, unfortunately. And so I decided I wanted to become an agent. And at that time, there was no such thing as certification and all that. You just say, hey, you want to be an agent? Hey, if you get the player, you're their agent. And so I just started, hey, you want me to represent you? You want me to? And so everybody saw that I used to be with Reggie all the time and with Thurman and all, and they figured, he's got to be pretty smart. Yeah,
Right.
Be my agent. Talk for me.
So who was your first player?
My first player, Jose Rijo.
Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah.
You know.
Yep. So he was a young phenomenon.
He was
a lot like Dwight Gooden. was.
Right, exactly. He was the Dwight. He was the Latin Dwight Gooden. He was 18. Dwight was 19. And so
And he threw fire.
But he had the greatest changeup ever. He just he looked like he was throwing 95, but all of a sudden it's
Just
80.
disappeared
Boom,
on you.
just, what was that? And
Wow.
so he was great. And so then I'll never forget that. The big noise in 1984 in spring training was Dwight Gooden, this a fastball, this and that, and so we had Rijo in spring training, and I said, boss, you can't let the boss show us up, please. And he said, what are you saying? I said, Rijo, he's not ready, boss. He'll be ready. He'll be ready. We can't why can't we have the youngest guy? You're right.
So you got him to listen to you.
So he listened. He brought him to New York. I remember I had to get him an apartment and all that. And
Because part of being an agent is a lot of babysitting.
babysitting is the biggest part.
And you did a lot of babysitting over the years.
A lot of babysitting.
Yeah. Now, back then, I recall you were sharing offices with, you were in Burt Padell's space.
By that time, I went to work with a guy by the name of David Fishoff.
Right. That's right.
And
yes.
we were because he represented a lot of different players. He had some baseball players, but he also had some football players. So I wanted that to diversify a little bit. You know what I'm saying? And he represented like Vince Ferragamo, and then in that office, Earl the Pearl Monroe had Pretty Pearl Records right there.
Yeah.
And then we had that famous gangster that's now in prison who was killing everybody in Harlem.
Oh, right.
What was his name? They made a movie
Bill
about him.
Underwood.
Bill
Underwood.
Hey, why do you have to say names?
Oh, okay.
What's wrong with you? He's coming out of prison soon.
Oh, is he?
Are you crazy?
Okay.
Stop it.
Right.
Bill, I never said your name. I didn't say it.
He didn't say it.
No. No, Tom.
I'm sure he's.
I think you heard it.
I'm sure he's a changed
What's wrong
man.
with you? Of course he is. He was always a great guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wasn't talking about him. I was talking about Al Capone.
Right. But he had. He was in the music industry.
He was in music.
Yeah.
How dare you?
There were a lot of crazy characters that you
Oh, my
were
God.
involved with.
So
back then.
many.
So Burt Padell was like the accountant to the music industry.
He was Madonna's accountant. He represented so
Cyndi
many.
Lauper.
But remember something. Burt Padell, the very first job he ever had, Yankee Bat Boy.
Get out of here! I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why he had the pictures in the office.
Yeah. He had all the pictures
Baseball.
and old contracts and things like that.
Yeah, that's how he got started.
So you seem to be able to have a relationship with all different types of people. A lot of these older guys like him. I'm going to throw out another name from the past, Bill Goodstein.
Oh my God, he's a very famous attorney. Represented the Kennedys. Represented some big name people, and he was a mentor to me. You know, I miss him very much. You know, he had he. Like most of the guys in the business, he had a gigantic ego. He represented people in the film industry, and he helped me with. We helped each other.
Yes.
With Dwight Gooden and Darryl from the standpoint of the legalese and everything else, and
so let's talk about that, because that was a critical point in your career in baseball, but it was also a critical juncture for the Yankees, because this was 96 Yankees. Bob Watson was general manager then.
Right.
Dwight and Darryl had both had their problems. They had both had spectacular careers as Mets, and then there were spectacular personal failures for both of them.
Right.
And so they were kind of on the recycle heap, really, when you reconnected with them, and you, working along with Bill Goodstein, really got both of them back and resuscitated their careers.
Two different issues. From a legal standpoint, I needed Goodstein more with Darryl.
Right.
Okay, Darryl was in 1995. He had gotten suspended by the San Francisco Giants, let go, and then released. And so, in essence, I spoke to George Steinbrenner about Darryl, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He said that he was interested. I called up Bill Goodstein, and I said, Bill, Darryl, George, et cetera. So they started to negotiate. Things worked out. Darryl signed with the Yankees. I spoke to George about Dwight. In that whole season of 1995, Steinbrenner had me babysit Dwight through his suspension. Take him to meetings, NA meetings, AA meetings, all that kind of stuff. Bring him along. Make sure that this guy can get back. That's when I brought Vincent Kenyon to Florida to help me, because Vincent is a recovering addict. So he helped me with that. He guided me. Vincent literally guided me to what recovery houses we should go to and all that kind of stuff. At one of the recovery houses, we met Ron Dock, okay, who was the head of he became the sponsor. Finally, I started a program for Dwight. I found a pitcher. I found a trainer. We threw batting practice. At the time, I could still throw batting practice. I was a lot younger, and I would hit against Dwight. You know what I'm saying? And it was when his fastball started popping again, and I was striking out all the time. He used to say, "Are you really trying?" and I wanted to curse him out because, but Anyway, that's what happened. A full year in his recovery process, and finally, we were gonna, we after it was all said and done, we were going to sign with the Yankees, but we couldn't just sign with the Yankees. We had to still audition for other teams, of which we did. His nephew was playing with the Florida Marlins, so I took him out there, and etc. Steinbrenner and Goodstein had fights over Darryl and the negotiations. And then Goodstein was a very flamboyant guy. He was as flamboyant as George was. So
two of the same type, two alpha male personalities.
Yeah, because Goodstein wanted to negotiate through the press. And in that situation, you couldn't.
Right.
But he had front page, back page of the Post, etc., what have you. And then Steinbrenner called me up and says, "Listen to me. I can't let Goodstein negotiate with me on Gooden. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have to pass on Gooden." And I said, "Boss, you're the only one that will sign him." And he said, "Ray, this guy made me look like a-hole in this, and what do you call it? I can't do it. I'm not. You know what I'm saying? You negotiate. We'll do this deal. We don't need him. You know what I'm saying? He said, I don't need Watson. You don't need Goodstein. We will do this ourselves. And that's how that happened.
Done. Right.
It cost me in my relationship with Goodstein. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I had to do what I had to do. You understand? And so me and the boss and Dwight sat down and we negotiated a 2-year deal plus an option for the 3rd year. And the rest is history.
Right, including that no-hitter that he pitched that year that led to the return of the Yankees after a drought to winning the World Series again.
And remember, after he pitched the no-hitter, I actually did a deal with Warner Brothers and met with Denzel Washington and S.I. Morales. S.I. was playing Negron, and what's his name? Denzel was playing Dwight.
Wow.
And that was a deal that was put together with Bruce Berman, who was the head of Warner Brothers at the time, and the gentleman who produced Norman Twain, who produced Lean on Me.
Yes.
So they wanted that kind of a film with redemption at the end.
Right.
But Dwight got into that fight with the cab driver, and that destroyed the deal.
Real life interrupting the Hollywood ending.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to take a departure here and talk about the fact that one of the things that has been a thread throughout your entire career is that you've always been interested in the aspect of giving back. You've always been involved with players and helped them with the off-the-field aspect. In fact, you mentioned that at the top of this interview about CC Sabathia. And so today you brought in a gentleman with you, Nick Singh. He's from the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and he's been somebody who you've been working with in terms of just that aspect of connecting athletes to Make-A-Wish. So first of all, Nick, I want to welcome you to Soul Lounge Primetime. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Good. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with Ray and what you do with Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Yes. So I met Ray 4 years ago at I was attending Suffolk County Community College, my associate's degree, and there was a little speaking going on, and he brought in a friend by the name of Greg Jagenberg that day, two-time world champion swimmer. And they were doing a speaking, and it was more of like an engagement with the classmates and stuff. And I just jumped in, and we were just, it was a very heartfelt conversation because we were talking about things that was going on in our past, and just, it was very moving in that room. Now, when we were leaving, Ray and I and Greg were walking out, and my professor at that time, his name is Bill O'Connell, and he had introduced me to Ray, and Ray had said that day that I see a lot of you in me, and I would like to, get your number. And we exchanged numbers that day. And, that was 4 years ago. And ever since then, he's not only became one of my best friends, but he's became a father figure in my life. Ray has done so much for me. And I'm so grateful to have met him. And, it's the best, one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because he's taught me so much. And the most important thing he's taught me is how to give unconditionally. No matter what the situation is, what the case is, just go and do it.
And so you have what has got to be one of the most interesting jobs in the world in terms of challenging and rewarding from an aspect of giving to people. So you are a wish granter for Make-A-Wish Foundation.
That's right, yes.
So tell us, what does a wish granter do?
Well, let's stop right there and say one of the reasons that I'm proud of this guy is because not only has he done that for Make-A-Wish, but he started... through his company, he started his own Make-A-Wish. Explain that.
Yes. So, with my experience with Make-A-Wish, something that I've noticed is that we were turning down a lot of 19-year-olds and 24-year-olds and stuff. And with Make-A-Wish, we're granting wishes for kids that are 2.5 to 18 years old. And it was bothering me because it's like, you know what, like 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds shouldn't be forgotten. They're still young too, you know. So it was only this year where I partnered up with a gentleman by the name of John Anthony, and me and him has grown a close relationship as well. He wanted to do something with charity. I wanted to start my own thing, and just what he offered and what I were to bring to the table, we just partnered up our ideas, put it together, and we collaborated something what's called Experiences for Causes. We are 501c3 pending right now, but we've still did what we had to do in the meantime, and we have incorporated 8 experiences since April of this year to now.
Oh, that's great.
And it's basically a Make-A-Wish Foundation, but it's for however old you are.
So tell me like one of those experiences. You don't have to name names, but tell me what happened.
Absolutely. So our very first one, it was Yankees opening day, and it was a kid. He was 17 years old, battling hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus is a condition a condition of the brain, and he was up to, at that time, he was at like 38 surgeries. Now he's at 42 brain surgeries. And so he had a wish. He had a Make-A-Wish, right? But, I wanted to continue. Another thing why I was doing this is I want to continue the relationship with these Make-A-Wishes. I didn't want to just come into a kid's life, be like, hey, here's your wish, see you later. I wanted to continue it. So our very first experience was he's a diehard Yankee fan. So, one day I showed up at his house, and I just said, hey, my name is Nick from Make-A-Wish Foundation, and I would like to just do a little, an interview with you. You're going to be on TV, whatever I had told him at that day. Next thing you know, maybe after about a half hour or so, a Sprinter pulls up at his house. And I said, I have a gift for you, actually. Let's come outside. He's thinking he's going to school. But a good friend of mine walks out, and he's a 2-time world champion with the New York Yankees, Jim Leyritz. He walks out, and he goes, hey, hi, Tyler. His name is Tyler. And he said, I have 2 tickets for you you and your father to go to Yankees opening day. We're leaving right now. And the kid's reaction was unbelievable. Wow. So that day, we rode into the stadium together, and we had a suite that day too. And it was just an amazing experience. And again, I have such a strong relationship with that young man still onto this day. We talk about every day. And that was one of, I don't have favorites, but that was one that stuck out because it was our very first one. And it was absolutely beautiful. And, I do these things because I love surprising kids, but I also love building the relationship with them, because it's more than just the cancer and the illnesses that they're fighting, but it's also an emotional thing too. It's like I know some kids they don't go to school, so who do they talk to at their age? And some of these guys, they're only a few years off from me, and I feel like I'm still a kid, and I still like to have fun and stuff. So. I still hang out with them and talk to them like I'm just one of their friends.
So now tell me about the tough part of it, because obviously these are situations where sometimes the people you work with and they pass on. So just tell me about one of those situations, and how do you deal with that, knowing you've done everything and had an impact in someone's life, but also having to deal with that time when you get the message that this person who you've just had this great experience has now passed on.
You know, that is the toughest part. You know, a lot of people say, you know, Nick, you're doing amazing things. That's so cool what you're doing and stuff. You're doing this and going all over the place. And I say, you know, yes, it's fun and it's awesome, and it's such a cool thing to do. But at the end of the day, what you just said, you know, I've had kids that passed away on me. And matter of fact, there were a couple of situations where the kids passed away before their wish was even delivered, and before their experiences for causes were delivered. And the toughest part is, you know, for me, it's like, I love building these relationships, as I mentioned, and I want to just come into their life and be a friend to them. But what happens is that I've had some of these kids that had passed away, and even over the summer, I was there at the funeral, and it's very emotionally draining. I'd be, you know, I can't tell you. There's many times where I've seen things that was just it's very disturbing, you know, but I try to fight for these kids and be with them at their side as much as I can. And, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've been back in my car and tears just start falling down on my face. But, you know, I always tell people, like, you know, these kids always say that I'm their heroes, but I don't look at it that way. I think that they're the real heroes, because look at what they're fighting, you know, and a lot of them are just smiling and cheering and having so much fun. And then every time I go back in my car, I had a long day, then I go do a wish grant, and I go back in my car, I'm like, you know what, like, I shouldn't even be complaining. You know, it's like, look at what they're fighting for, you know. And so you know, that's definitely one of the biggest challenges, knowing that, like, you know, a lot of these kids, some of them do face terminal illnesses, and you know, I just have to continue bringing the hope and the joy and giving them love and showing them support as much as I can. You know.
So I want to switch gears for a second, Ray, because you are a 5-time author, and you're also a playwright. And you got a performance coming up this week, correct?
I have Bat Boy. We've been doing Bat Boy now for the last 2 years, and actually in our Florida, we do it in New York and we do it in Florida. In Florida, Nick plays Little Ray.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So you got a little acting. You got some acting chops too.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Wow.
He puts on my Afro wig from that era, and he does a nice job. And then we have this other kid, Carmine. I don't remember Carmine's last name, but he does a wonderful job here in New York. You know, and so it's terrific. The show's been wonderful. It's about my time with the Yankees in the 70s, from the day George Steinbrenner gets me up until the point where Thurman Munson dies. And you know, it's me being able to bring the love that I had for the guys of that era, because that, you know, I like, you know, this is all great. My Yankee years have all been wonderful, but the 70s, those were my true brothers. You know, because I was young. I was, you know, I was 17 years old, and so those were,
you were living the dream.
Yeah, well, I was.
So it's been all downhill since then.
Because remember what the 70s was like.
Yes.
You know, today is different. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have all these different things.
Right.
We didn't have Facebook, Twitter, all that crap. You know, we got a chance to be kids, to go crazy.
Right.
You know, and you know, to be in a car. I remember, like, I used to drive Thurman Munson to the airport so he can get on his private plane to fly home to be with his family. And so I would have to drive him to the airport, and then he would give me his brand new Cadillac. And it wasn't that it was a brand new Cadillac. It was that it was a brand new Thurman Munson Cadillac. So the girls were jumping in the back seat. You know, it was just, you know, it was a glorious, as they said in the movie Goodfellas, it was a glorious time. You know, that's it, you know. You know, it was fun. And the boss, you know, come on, man, I was the boss's boy, you know. And even though he was a madman and he was crazy, but he was wonderful. You know, he could be like, oh, forget it, man.
He was complex.
You know, he was complex, and that's what made it great. And, you know, like he used to say to me, sometimes I feel bad for you. And I say, why? He says, because later on, you're going to find out that these guys are really, I can't even use the words. You know what I want to say.
Right, but they were complex too.
You know, he says, because they're gonna be jealous of you. I said, but I don't have anything. Yeah, but you have my friendship. And you know what? And they were right. He was right. You know, because it was, sometimes it could be tough. Like when he was in town, hey Ray, how are you? Patting me in the back, hey buddy.
When he was gone, the knives in the back.
You know, exactly. Yeah. Because sometimes it was like watching a Bronx Tale. And then you remember when the guy Phil the peddler would give the fruit to the kid,
right?
And then he would say, "Tell Sonny I gave him to you."
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And it would be like, "Tell the boss I hooked you up." You know what I'm saying? But you know, you know, I mean, just, you know, like one of the great times in the play, you actually get to see when Billy Martin takes me to a restaurant called Patsy's, which is on 56 and Broadway. And there we had dinner with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. And at that point, you know, Mr. Sinatra was telling me about the importance of having your self-esteem and to keep your head up and never be ashamed of who you are, never be ashamed of your color, never be you know, and invaluable words because they came from Mr. Sinatra. And he told me about, hey, when Sammy was a young kid in the 40s, I was the guy that used to tell him that, hey, you have to be, I told him the same thing. And he had told me about when Sammy went to Vegas and they didn't want to let him walk in through the front door. He said, then you know what, I ain't doing a show here. If he can't come through the front door and stay in this hotel, then you don't have Mr. Sinatra. And
that was the end of that.
And that was the end of that. And I just... that hit me. That
right.
You know, that
to
hit
get
home.
those stories straight from literally
from
the
the
horse's
man.
mouth. Wow.
From the man. And I love that. To this day, I walk into Patsy's and it's like the owner's still alive, and his son is still there, and you know, it's just like it's like you know, coming home.
Yeah, so you got the New York pass.
Yeah. Oh man, no question. I love it. I got to take Nick there one day.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you a couple of questions about a couple of general managers. So one of them is Bob Watson, and I was privileged through you to be able to not only meet and develop a friendship with Bob Watson, develop a lifelong friendship with his son Key. He had a short but very impactful stay as the general manager of the Yankees. My view is prejudiced, but I felt like the Yankees did not treat him in retrospect for his position the way they should have. But tell me a little bit about the general managementship of Bob Watson and your time then. And then you had an interesting role there because you were bringing on the two players who at that point in time he really didn't want those players on the team.
Right, and you know that.
Yes.
Right, okay. And so in essence, that's why I have to give Mr. Steinbrenner all the credit in the world for, you know, like I don't care. You know, so everybody deserves a second chance. I know that they had drug issues, but you know what? It maybe this is the time. Maybe I'm able to have an impact in their life, and he proved that it wasn't just about baseball. He was, because if you talk to these guys to this day, they say, "Hey, he was like my father." You know what I'm saying? And that's how they felt about him. And so I give George all the credit in the world. And you know, Bob was just trying to follow protocol, you know, per se. You know, he was doing what everybody else was doing. But Bob went in at a very difficult time because he was replacing the legendary Gene Michael. Okay. And also he was the first black general manager in Yankee history. You know, the first minority GM in Yankee history. And the only
yes
the only minority general manager in Yankee history.
Yes.
So that was heavy, and then he had to deal with the most difficult, the toughest, the hardest owner in the history of sports, who had win at all cost, no excuses, no whatever, and you know what? Bob had to deal with the aspect of that the boss was going to deal with him like he was his general manager, not like he was his first black GM or white GM, but GM, period. And whatever he gave G. Michael, he gave Bob Watson. You know what I'm saying? And there were a couple of times where Bob said, "I've had enough." He dropped his keys and he walked out, and the boss said to me, "Go after him." You know what I'm saying? Because he didn't want him to leave like that. So it was tough. It was tough for Bob to work for George Steinbrenner, just like it was tough for any general manager to work for George Steinbrenner.
So my second question is your thoughts about Brian Cashman, who took over after Bob Watson and has been there and has had probably one of the longest tenures as general manager.
The longest tenure, not of any GM today, but not in Yankee history.
Okay.
There was one guy who had a longer tenure than he did. I forgot his name, but it wasn't easy for Cashman in dealing with the boss. I mean, how he didn't leave at certain times shows me that that this man had a big heart and a strong stomach. Because it wasn't easy for Cash.
Yeah.
And after the boss died, he's he's done a nice job. He's been strong. He's brought in some good players. This year, how he did what he did this year, if this guy's not the executive of the year, then they shouldn't even have that award. Because he was tremendous. And let me just say that after the boss died, like people used to say, well, let's see how long Ray Negron's going to last now that the boss is gone. And Brian Cashman stood up for me on a couple of occasions, one in particular where he just, when someone would say, well, do we really need him? And Cashman was like, hey, do you understand what this guy does in this community? Do you understand that we don't even have to ask him? He just does it. And that was because of how George Steinbrenner set it up. George knew that, hey, just go do what you got to do. You know what I'm saying? Period.
So you've been there throughout this time. You've taken a lot of players and you've shown them how to do the community service aspect of being a Yankee, which is a tremendously important one. Out of all the players who you've seen, tell us who you feel are some of the biggest in terms of giving and being involved with the community and just sharing themselves off the field.
From this era, CeCe. There's no question. Number one, even more than Jeter. Yeah, I said it. Okay? But CeCe, okay? Because that was, between him and his wife, that was like a full-time job. Okay? And, I was doing a movie. I was producing a film, an animated film called Henry and Me. And I went to CeCe. Nobody was getting paid, and I had big stars in this film. Nobody was getting paid, okay? And CeCe was right there, front and center, playing himself in the film. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I went to Jeter. I asked him to do it. He wouldn't do it. Okay, for whatever the reason, And anyway, that's my only shot at Jeter.
So going back, besides CeCe, who would you say?
At that point, it would be a tie with everybody else. CeCe was, from what I witnessed, and I didn't do a lot with CeCe. You know why?
Because you didn't have to.
Exactly. Because I didn't have to.
Right.
So I just left that bandwagon alone, let them do their own thing. But with other guys, it would be like, would you go to this school with me? And like this year, a guy that was great, wonderful, was Gio Urshela, the third baseman, terrific, and Gleyber Torres, terrific.
Well, you've always seemed to like you played that role of showing the young players, hey, this is how you become a Yankee.
Remember, I always tell kids that when a player puts on that uniform, it's like Superman putting on his costume. You know what I'm saying? Because I wholeheartedly believe that. You know, you when you're a major leaguer, you have a responsibility, to these kids. You know, when I was a kid, it was the aspect of meeting my first Major League Baseball player, and that was important to me because it gave me the oomph. You know, and when these kids meet those players, it gives them the oomph. And I'm not talking about whether they're sick or not sick or whatever. Kids are kids, and they meet them and they, forget about it. It's a whole different thing, you know, because even into the adults act more like kids than their kids do. You know what I'm saying? Especially today, in today's era, you know, we got too much distraction. With these kids, they don't want to go outside and play baseball and all these kind of things. They want to play marbles or whatever, you know.
Marbles, really, Ray? Really, Ray?
Okay.
I think you wanted to say video games, right?
Forgive me.
Playing marbles? What are you talking about?
Forgive me for I know not what I say.
All right, I got one more question to ask you. Your big shot at Hollywood fame and fortune, the Cotton Club.
Oh my God!
Freddie the Waiter.
Wow! Oh my God! You remember the name?
Yeah.
Wow.
How did that come about?
When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a baseball player or a movie star, and I had an uncle, Keno, who had been an extra in a movie back in the 50s. And so he used to come back and tell me his stories, and I was fascinated with Hollywood. And so I always said that if I ever got a chance, so that when Reggie Jackson came to the Yankees, in 1977, Elvis Presley died. And I was like bummed out because I loved Elvis. And Reggie said to me, well, you're quiet today. What's the story? And I said, Elvis died. And he goes, okay, and I said I loved Elvis. And so then he said, hey, you think I'm like the Elvis Presley of baseball? You know, like the king of swing? And I said, no, Reggie, you're not. And he said, why not? He said, because whenever Elvis did a movie, all his guys worked in the movie. And so Reggie couldn't be outdone. He picked up the phone, called his agent, when's my next commercial? And he says, we got Volkswagen coming up. He said, get Ray Negron in it. I got into that commercial. I got my SAG card. I ended up doing commercials on my own. From that led on to my first movie, which was The Blue Skies Again with Andy Garcia. That led to The Cotton Club with Richard Gere and Gregory Hines and Hines. Oh, forget about it. And that's how that happened. The great Francis Ford Coppola directed.
They just re-released it, right?
Yeah.
I think they remastered it.
Yeah, they cut me out again.
They didn't put you in it.
But I got the pictures.
Well, okay. Well, hey, man, you were there.
That's right.
You're like Forrest Gump, man. You're just outside the frame there a little bit, eating a box of chocolates.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I, by the way, my latest film is called Bottom of the Ninth. Just came out, and the videos just came out. So go and get them. You see me with the wonderful Sofia Vergara.
Oh,
you
man.
know,
whoa.
You know,
okay,
exactly.
Now I'm impressed.
Okay, that's right. And I am one of the co-stars in that film. You know, yes, I do have lines.
Okay, all right. Okay. Good.
No, I do not have a nude scene with Sophia. I'm sorry.
I know you tried. You tried. Even after the film wrapped, you were still trying.
Okay,
right?
So it is what it is.
So I want you to tell us a little bit about your performance this week. If people are interested in the Bat Boy, where can they find information at?
The Argyle Theater in Babylon. The Argyle Theater in Babylon this coming Sunday, the 27th. This coming Sunday, the 27th, and that stars Mickey Rivers. That's also going to star Mickey Rivers, Dwight Gooden. Who else, Nick? Mickey, Dwight. I'm
Danny
losing.
Cipolla, Sal
Sal Valentinetti, from The Voice.
So Mickey Rivers is actually going to be
Yes,
in
he-
it, and
he
Dwight
acts
is
in it.
actually going to be in it.
And Dwight Gooden.
Wow.
Mickey Rivers, Dwight Gooden. I believe also David Cohn, who's supposed to be playing Lou Gehrig.
Okay, wow.
And some wonderful Broadway stars, including Layla Dion, who's incredible. Danny Cipolla, who's the Yankees podcast queen. She has like 60,000 a day. I told you about
Yes,
her.
yes.
We have Charlie Santoro, who's from the Yes Network. He plays Yogi Berra. Incredible people, just incredible people. Remember, Nick Singh in this version plays Ray's best friend Hector.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Remember my friend
I do
Hector?
remember Hector,
Right,
yes,
so
yes.
he plays Hector.
Okay.
You know, next to Little Ray, and so it's fun. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, and that's at 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
2 p.m. on Sunday.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's tickets available, so come on down, and come on down.
Nick, I want to thank you also for joining us. Can you share any contact information for you at Make-A-Wish Foundation?
Yeah, all my work is on Instagram. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Nick Singh, SINGH7. And you can just reach out to me if you're interested in the work that I do, if you want to partner up, and all my work is on there.
Okay, well, Nick, we may have you back on the show because I'm really, really fascinated by just the work that you do on Make-A-Wish. And so I'm going to leave that invitation open that we may have you back again to just talk a little bit about what you're doing.
Awesome.
So we're about ready to wrap up. I want to thank Ray Negron, the Yankees bat boy, sharing us great
Bob,
stories.
it does, when you say contact me on Instagram, or do people really actually do that?
Yeah, people younger
Ray
than,
Negron Yanks.
Yeah.
Ray Negron Yanks.
On
Instagram
Instagram.
or Twitter or Facebook. Ray Negron, blah, blah, blah.
Right, Ray Negron Yanks. So thank you for joining us here on the Soul Lounge Prime Time here on WHCR 90.3 FM.
The voice of Harlem.